Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The one-day visit of Russian President Vladimir Putin for the annual summit has yielded quite a few agreements, some of which are seen as far-reaching. Prior to his visit, there were doubts expressed about the relations between the two countries in the context of the global developments. The visit was therefore watched keenly. Now that Putin has returned and an array of agreements have been signed, and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made it clear that Russia will be the most important defense partner, has the ties improved? Have the doubts which had trailed Putin now been put to rest? Has India and Russia redrawn the relations? And what can we expect in the future in the context of the global scenario? We will look at all this today with an eminent panel of experts. I have with me Rajiv Sikri, former Ambassador and Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, G. Balachandran, Consulting Fellow at the IDSA and a nuclear expert, Commodore retired Uday Bhaskar, Director, Society for Policy Studies, and Professor Ajay Kumar Patnaik of Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies at the JNU, and Amit Baruah, Resident Editor at the Hindu. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Sikri, before Putin came to India, some of your former colleagues, some of the other analysts and observers were talking about some kind of a slowness which has come into the relationship between India and Russia. You think that those observations were right, and do you think that after this visit things have improved?
Well, I think this visit was an attempt to really stimulate a somewhat flagging relationship and to reassure Russia that the India-Russia relationships remains a very important one to which we attach the highest priority, despite the fact that the world has changed and India's relations with other partners like Japan, USA, and so forth have greatly improved. So you saw in Prime Minister Modi's press statement, the liberal use of words like incomparable, unmatched, unique, reassuring President Putin that although our options have diversified, have improved, we will continue to have Russia as our most important defense partner. So I think that, this was a visit which took forward many of the things which have already been in the pipeline, but it was packaged quite well to convey an impression that there is going to be a dynamic forward movement. On the concrete side, I would say that we got some agreement on 12 nuclear power stations over the next decade or so. But Prime Minister Modi was quite frank in saying that in the hydrocarbon sector, India was somewhat disappointed. So I think that the vision roadmap is okay. The question is how will it be implemented, and that's where we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, Uday Bhaskar, there's some amount of skepticism which I can see in the voice of Mr. Rajiv Sikri also, and there were people even before the visit who were expressing this kind of skepticism. You think that things have improved during this visit? You think that the Prime Minister has been able to convince Russian President that we still think that they are as important as they have been for all these decades?
Well, I would say on balance that this has been a satisfactory summit as far as India and Russia are concerned, and perhaps both sides have reviewed the relationship in a far more objective way than what was the case in the past. We are now familiar with what has appeared in the public domain by way of major agreements and various other issues that have been taken forward. And I would make this point that as far as the statements and the joint vision documents, we now have both directivity and a certain amount of content as far as the bilateral relationship is concerned. But I also think we need to pay attention to that which may have been said in private between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. because the world has changed in a very significant way since
Right.
the last visit of President Putin when we had the summit in 2012. There are a number of issues where you can see both unease and a certain amount of unhappiness, both in Moscow and in Delhi. For example, on the Indian side, we are aware that Russia has now agreed to provide arms to Pakistan.
Right.
That is one issue which is in the public domain and has attracted some comment and dissatisfaction in India. On the flip side, in Moscow, there are a number of issues where Moscow has also expressed its concern. For instance, the fact that there is a closer relationship between India and the United States, which is now emerging as a major military supplier. Then there is the whole issue of Ukraine and Crimea. So my sense is that both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin are very strong leaders. And I think they would have reviewed the relationship about the various changes that have taken place regionally, globally, and how the bilateral is to be taken forward. And from my perspective as a security analyst, I would say that, again, the agreement in principle about the helicopters is quite significant. And we need to see how that would be translated by way of the Make in India commitment that Prime Minister
Absolutely.
Modi was hoping that President Putin would make.
Absolutely.
So I think on balance, I would say satisfactory. Focus on that which is not in the public domain is also very important.
Okay.
Girish?
Professor Patnaik, how do you look at this? You think that the Russian, it's very, what Uday Bhaskar said is very interesting. What is said, what is left unsaid in the meeting, is what is very important.
Well, it's very clear what is left unsaid, Since the Ukrainian issue erupted, the Russians have every reason to be very indebted to the Indians.
Right.
From the beginning of that statement when we said Russia has legitimate interests, in Ukraine or in its neighborhood, and the imposition of sanctions and, trying to isolate Russia, given that context, I mean, India has stood up and said, see, like in the past, Russia used to stand behind India in many crisis situations during Soviet period. Today, India has shown that it is also standing behind a friend. And despite lots of pressure...
But despite this, why was there this feeling that, the relations between the two was
people evaluate
flagging.
things in materialistic terms, how much weapons are being supplied, how much proportion of weapons are being supplied by the US, the French, and so on and so forth. But if these two countries have a special strategic partnership and looking for an alternative vision of a world or a global order where they will have even alternative multilateral financial institutions away from the Bretton Woods system, they are thinking of trading in local currencies, so many things that they are visualizing for a future partnership. In that context, these weapons, how much weapons we could buy, how much weapons Americans are selling, it doesn't matter. And when people evaluate their relationship in that terms, then there is a problem.
Okay.
But my point is, India really has shown that it is willing to walk the distance and stand by Russia when it is feeling internationally isolated. So this visit must be more satisfying to Putin. And for India, yes, there are opportunities because the Chinese are getting a lot of deals now. And Russia is looking to this region also, Asian region, Asia Pacific. So for us, there are future material gains. But immediately, I would say, after Ukraine, the isolation of Russia in the West, when they need a friend in Asia, India has stood by it.
And they have found that India is a reliable partner as far as that is concerned.
India is a reliable friend. And given the kind of warmth that this government has shown towards Putin, and the words that his ambassador was saying, the phrases we have used, I think the warmth will carry on and more intensify this friendship.
Okay. Professor Balachandran, the question is, one of the most important agreements here is about this nuclear deal, the energy, the vision statement on energy. And how do you look at this? Is this attainable in the, they're talking about in the next 10 years or 20 years, and in the context of liability law, the other countries still we're not being able to work out with other countries. You think this is a step forward?
I think so. One of the agreement is a contract which is already signed between NPCIL which means if a contract has been signed, that means the liability issue has been to the satisfaction of both somehow overcome. It's an interesting thing. This is going to put pressure on the other nuclear suppliers.
Absolutely.
How they did it, we don't know. They could have done it in a number of ways. Hopefully, it was done in a manner which did not give a special preference to.
Which was it expected that this would be worked out?
It was workable a year ago.
Okay.
I think the only reason it was not signed a year ago was probably because of the state of the government in India. I don't think they have added anything to the negotiations that was not already there last year. So that reflects on the determination of the government here to go ahead and also put into do. The second thing is this. Notwithstanding the normal economic relations between India and Russia, which has never been very strong.
Exactly.
Russia is still very influential and important for India in 2-3 areas. One is space, which there are a lot of restrictions in other countries. The other is military.
Right.
Although BrahMos was the last major project, hopefully let us see how this helicopter project goes. It is true, as Professor Pandya has said, that United States has been the major supplier during the last 4 years.
Right.
Russia has been second. But hopefully that should not become the linchpin. But defense technology, certainly Russia will play a major role in India.
Okay. Amit, is that what India was looking for? You think that India has achieved what it looked for as far as this visit is concerned?
I think so. I think that, similar doubts were expressed when the first NDA government came to power. And when the summit started, precisely what you're saying, that, governments are not going, the relationship somehow will, suffer a setback. So these fears were not new. And in a sense, the annual summit started with Mr. Vajpayee as Prime Minister. So I think in that sense, there's a continuity. I think the key challenges of the Indo-Russia relationship have been there for some time. I mean, poor trade, poor economic relations, these have been there for a while. But as far as the allies are concerned, or if you read through any joint statements, I mean, the kind of agreement and clarity that exists between India and Russia is perhaps unmatched, because both sides tend usually to borrow the other's language and include it in the joint statement. This time there are some nuances in the joint statement, but if you see on the issue of terrorism, for instance, Kashmir and Chechnya are mentioned in the same sentence. So there are not many occasions in which these two countries, these two areas will find particular focus. So that political agreement has been there. And I don't think that any government, howsoever new it is or howsoever different it is in India, is going to jeopardize a relationship that already exists. And I think what we have seen is proof of that there is a level of continuity. There is continuity, in fact, in all our relationships. If you see with the United States, with Russia, maybe there have been a couple of blips with China in terms of remarks and so on, but there's no great change or great shift. So in that sense, I would say that till now, and I emphasize that, the continuity in foreign policy is very visible.
Yeah, but Amit, the question is this. Before Putin came in, there was the geopolitical situation which has happened around the world, where India seems to be more getting closer and closer to US. That was something which Uday Bhaskar also mentioned. That has been a problem for the Russians.
But
and
Girish,
we have had problems with them because, they...
But Girish, this moving closer to the US happened under... Dr. Manmohan Singh is Prime Minister.
My question is this.
I mean,
in that context, you think that the two leaders would have raised these concerns, mutual concern which they have, like Russia going and striking a defense deal with Pakistan and the way the Russia-China relationships are developing. You think these were issues which would have been discussed?
Well, I do hope so, because if you see Prime Minister Modi's remarks when the Chinese leader came visiting, I think whatever he said in public, which was quite direct about India's concerns, was repeated to him in private as well. So I do hope that this was a moment in which the two, I'm not privy to the discussions that went on, but certainly I think that this government has spoken quite plainly on China, and it doesn't seem to have impacted our relationship adversely as of now. So I think that in this relationship, it's for us to reinvent this relationship. In this modern world, you do still need friends, but what kinds of friends? So the changing contours of the Indo-Russian relationship we have seen. Now, if we are looking at defense, I think, as I think the professor said about, the amount of purchases, measured in terms of money. Now, it's also up to us what we want want to buy. Finally, it's in our interest. I mean, third countries may have wares to offer, but it's up to us as, in industry experts or arms experts or analysts is to decide what this country needs. So I think overall, this level of doubt perhaps has been raised by those who never wanted good Indo-Russian relations. I think that there is a body of opinion which always points fingers at these relationships and tends to succeed on occasion.
Okay, Mr. Sikri, is that the way you would look at it? Because the question is this: you think that the same question actually I was asking Amit. You think that the two leaders would have discussed these concerns which both the countries have about each other? And does it reflect in any way in the statement?
Certainly, we would have discussed. Look, the main thing is that Russia, I think, would have been reassured by India that we are not going to go into any Western camp. Because if indeed a new Cold War is coming up between Russia and the West, we have to be careful not to take sides in that. So that will require some deft diplomacy. And this visit would have been the occasion for India to signal to Russia that although our relations with the United States and its allies are growing, we are not going to abandon old friends. So that is important. I'm sure that the Russia-China relationship would have figured, but if you notice that there is also the cooperation with China and Russia in multilateral fora, BRICS, RIC, and so forth. There's also a proposal to do a study on a pipeline, a hydrocarbons pipeline, which can only come via China. Now, if that kind of project were to fructify in 5-10 years, that would change global geopolitics.
Absolutely.
So we are keeping all our options open, rightly, I think so. And Russia also, I think, would begin to take India a little more seriously than it may have, because it needs the Indian market for hydrocarbons. It needs Indian political support when it is under pressure from the West. So this was, I think, a mutually reassuring visit. The Pakistan thing, I really don't attach too much importance to it. The Russians, I don't think, will go too far with Pakistan. What they are looking for is some leverage with Pakistan so that Pakistan is more cooperative on their security concerns, and fundamentalism, drugs, terrorism, in a very uncertain situation in Afghanistan.
Okay.
The biggest weakness in our relationship is trade and economic relations. And as you can see, the target is only $30 billion by 2025 and mutual investments of $30 billion, which is very, very little.
Right.
So the focus of the India-Russia relationship has to be on things like energy, both nuclear and hydrocarbons, and on defense, high technology, outer space. There's talk of rare earths.
All these things are reflected in some of the agreements.
Things like that. And we need to maintain the political understanding.
Absolutely.
There's now going to be a widening of contacts. The consultations between the foreign ministries will be on a wide range of issues.
Right.
We want to send our defense officers for training there.
Right.
The trouble is that although we get a significant proportion of our defense equipment from Russia, our thinking in the defense forces is very Western oriented. So that creates a certain mismatch. I agree with those who have said that we should not measure the value of our defense relationship with Russia by how much we actually buy, but what we buy. The kind of stuff we are getting from Russia, nuclear submarine, aircraft carrier, BrahMos missiles, other stuff which we are hoping to now jointly produce and develop. That is very important.
Okay. Uday Bhaskar, one of the things is, which you also mentioned earlier, and Ambassador Sikri also is talking about, is about the political relationship. That is where things can go wrong if it is not handled properly. And you think that that is something which has been handled this time. You think that in the future, these kind of doubts which existed about each other will not be there anymore after yesterday's summit?
Well, I would say that the political contact and relationship between India and Russia after this summit has definitely become more robust, because we also need to recall that as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned, this is the first formal bilateral summit with Mr. Putin.
Right.
Because soon after becoming Prime Minister, being sworn in as Prime Minister, Mr. Modi had met with his Japanese counterpart, he'd met with the Chinese leader, Mr. Xi Jinping, he went to the United States and met Barack Obama. And I think in that sense, this meeting with Mr. Putin was very important and significant to get the political comfort level in the appropriate manner. But that having been said, Girish, I do want to say that for India, we need to look at this visit from the Indian perspective.
Right.
I use the word review, that both India and Russia need to review the bilateral relationship in the context of various developments both regionally and globally. Now, Moscow's support to India has been very valuable, frankly, since 1948 when the Kashmir issue first went into the international domain. I think India acknowledges that. India has also stood by Moscow soon after the end of the Cold War. So in that sense, both sides, I think, have made those commitments and have in a way walked the talk. But now in 2014, the way in which India has got, shall we say, a certain profile, and India under Mr. Modi wants to conduct itself in a certain manner, I think that needed to be conveyed to Mr. Putin. He himself is a very strong leader. He has his vision of how Russia is going to emerge over the next decade. So I think that kind of a consultation was very important. And I would also expect that there will be areas where India and Russia perhaps will not be on the same page. And this has to do with what I would call as the way in which Mr. Putin has handled both Ukraine and Crimea, and what this has done at the international level. United States, European Union, Japan, all of them are very important partners for India.
Right.
So I think to that extent, there is a rearrangement going on. And I think that part of the bilateral relationship is something both sides will need to work on.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that, they are aware of what are the priorities.
Okay.
And for India, I think this post-2014 scenario in Afghanistan is an area where I believe consultation with Russia would also be very, very valuable.
Okay.
Girish?
Professor Patnaik, would you agree with that? That there is a need to work on this relationship. It's not just that one summit will be able to overcome certain problem. World scenario, a new Cold War kind of situation developing where India stands. All these things are important.
No, I mean, we have discussed in this very platform about the new Cold War kind of situation. But this summit is a breakthrough summit in the sense that we not only reassure Russia that you are facing international isolation and India is with you, but there are so many geopolitical issues in which India needs Russia now. It's not weapons, or as I said earlier also.
And
Shanghai cooperation.
Can we say in the same breath Russia needs India as much?
Absolutely. Because we are now trying to create certain multilateral institutions. Now, I just mentioned BRICS. There is Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We are working on stabilizing Afghanistan. Then we are looking at a Eurasian integration process, which will start from 1st of Jan 2015. We are trying to access through the international North-South transport corridor to this Eurasian market. We are trying to have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union or the Customs Union. All these things are opening up, for us. And we have to have close relationship with Russia because in some of these forums, China is there with which we have sometimes, difficult relationships. So Russia could be the mediating force to bring us together and let the multilateral process go on.
Professor Balachandran, as far as this, the nuclear field is concerned, the civil nuclear cooperation. So you said a very important thing last time in your previous comment. You said that this is going to put pressure on other countries. So you think India has, by striking this deal with Russia, India has created the leverage for itself?
No, there's no question it has. But look, Apart from nuclear, that was a foregone conclusion. My only question, why did it take them so long to sign it? Point is this, in the coming years, Arctic is going to open. Arctic is a major issue. And Russia is a major member of the Arctic Circle. India wants to become part of that. Then we have got the question of, fortunately so far, the joint statement I said about sanctions must be UN Security Council.
Right.
There can be no sanction, UN Security Council sanction against Russia. But the point is this, the European Union and the Americans also know that. Now the question is this, if they start putting unilateral sanctions, then the question comes around, India's responsibility, very important. We'll have to wait and see what happens. For instance, Iran, it's a unilateral sanction that's affecting us.
Yes.
So let us not be sanguine about that India will be able to stand by. We'll have to start balancing again interests. But the point is, Russia has been so far in all our areas of strategic interest, not so much as economics, they have been very steadfast friends.
And we need to reciprocate. That's what you're saying.
And secondly, we need not be things like, I agree with Ambassador Sikri, that these minor hiccups, that something like Pakistan and Russia, we should make any noise about it.
Okay.
That's not an issue at all.
Okay, Amit, final wrap up. You think that this is going to pave the way for better relations, obviously, you said. But the fact is that how is India going to deal with, say, the US, which will also be looking very closely at our relations with Russia?
Oh, absolutely. I think, President Obama is next.
Yes.
He will be here shortly.
So it'll be very interesting.
And I think that, all countries, whether it's China or Russia, everybody wants to have good relations with the United States, just as we want to have good relations with the United States. So I think that's a given. Now, in this, with the rapidly changing world, how you leverage your relationship.
Balachandran said, if they are faced with a sanction kind of situation, where do we stand? How do we react?
Well, actually, it would all depend on our interests. For instance, with Iran, we had some solid interests at stake. So we did try to, we reduced our purchases, but we've tried to, pay them in different ways. So clearly that stage has not yet been reached, but obviously the relationship will be tested only if these sanctions escalate. But the fact remains that whether it's the Arctic or whether these are other areas, the nature of cooperation and the political relationship is undergoing a transformation.
Right.
So it's up to the two political leaderships to use this relationship in a way which benefits both. Because after all, I can't remember any other country which has used, a veto 75 or 80 times in the Security Council. So I don't think there's any other parallel that exists globally.
Okay, I think on that note, we need to end. As Amit rightly pointed out at the end, that both the leaders need to work on this relationship. And in the fast-changing global scenario, how they will react to these situations will also be very important. But the visit of Putin, certainly, as all my panelists say, has been very helpful, and it has proved important for both the countries. Thanks to all my guests, Rajiv, Sikri, Professor Balachandran, Professor Patnaik, Amit, Baruah, and Uday, Bhaskar. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture, same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend.